There's been a lot of developments in the last week. Give a sense of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, before I begin again, that it's unbelievable what we're watching in the Gaza Strip. The appalling crimes of Israel targeting civilians, targeting hospitals, like Layla said, targeting entire neighborhoods for no military purpose whatsoever, but just to destroy and kill. It's appalling to watch, and we'll break down resistance videos. There's been courageous resistance from the north to the south of the Gaza Strip, but this war is a war on civilians, and we're watching that every single day. The reports out of Gaza over the last 72 hours are just shocking. The execution of civilians who are bound, what we're watching under the brutal conditions, environmental conditions right now in the middle of winter, people living without tents, stitching UNRWA food aid bags together to create tarps, taking the tarps off the aid trucks so that they can sleep under them in the pouring rain, while Israel massacres civilians at a rate that hasn't changed at all, killing 200 people a day that we know of. And we know those numbers aren't complete because we know that people are taking dead family members from their homes and burying them outside. We know people are being buried in hospital parking lots. These are shocking and appalling crimes that underpin this entire war that we've seen. And it's not abating at all. But we'll get into the resistance because while the war is targeting civilians above the ground, the resistance appears to be intact and resisting from the far north still to the very furthest in the south. And just to show a map of the Gaza Strip for people here, we had Israeli soldiers killed in the north, up north of Gaza City. And today we got reports from Al Jazeera about that you reported on at the beginning, Nora, about executions of bound and blindfolded people being buried in mass graves. These kind of crimes are not targeting the resistance. In the south, we can see Khan Yunis is, of course, right now the center of the focus of Israel's campaign. And that campaign has been to push from the west to the east, where the safe area that Israel told everybody to go to is right along that western coast of Khan Yunis. And so the army has come around and is effectively using the civilians who they told to go to that tiny strip of land with no resources. They're the backdrop of Israel's push eastward. They're pushing eastward toward the Israeli border. In Khan Yunis, there's been significant resistance, and if we show this next map, you can see that the focus of these attacks has been the hospitals. They're coming down on Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. Israel reinvaded the north in the last few days, and literally their first target of the reinvasion was Shifa Hospital. That through the incredible bravery of the medical staff and civilian staff in Gaza, attempting to get that hospital, the biggest in Gaza, up and running again, Israel's first target of their invasion was Shifa Hospital. So again, just to reiterate, appalling crimes that we're watching, and hopefully these cases like Layla's case, hopefully there's some accountability through the ICJ, through the domestic courts. I just hope that these Israelis that are taking part in this are not able to travel anymore, that they fear universal jurisdiction for the rest of their lives, because these crimes are shameful and will go down in history. I just wanted to say that to start off. But let's get to the resistance, because the resistance has been fierce. There doesn't appear to be any dwindling in the number of attacks. Israel's forces are not in the cities in the way that they were before. 4 months on to the war, they're learning, and they're staying out of the way and bombing civilians from the air. And so here we see resistance in Khan Yunis. And again, all these videos that we're showing are going to be from the last 7 days since you last saw us. This is an Islamic Jihad operation, Soraya al-Quds, their armed wing. And we're watching a joint operation here because there's a united front in Gaza, joint operations where all of the resistance factions are participating and communicating in the resistance. And what we're seeing here is a Soraya al-Quds fighter who originally used his RPG-7 to fire a rocket-propelled grenade. But if we watch when the video comes back around the second time, we'll see him miss with this. And goes back into the building, which is right beside where the Israelis are. So there's nothing like clearing going on, which if you read the newspapers, you'll hear about Israel's clearing operations. There's nothing like clearing going on. We're seeing Palestinian fighters right beside the tanks at every stage. So now he goes inside and he gets Qassam Brigade's weapon, a Yasin 105 that we've talked about on our program, and comes at the same tank. We're watching the same tank be targeted. He comes at it from a different angle with a different weapon from a different armed group. So you can see them participating. You could see the one who shot the first shot is the one who passed him that weapon there. So we're getting this again. The resistance always says that their deeds are not strictly what's captured on camera. If anything, it's the opposite. They don't have enough cameras for each of their units, but they embed these photographers in their units so that they give us a sense of what's happening on the ground. And we're able to cover this war largely without the Western press, which is not in Gaza, strictly from Palestinian journalists on the ground and the resistance reports themselves, which in terms of media blackouts, that Israel is attempting by barring journalists from entering the Gaza Strip, the Palestinians have undermined that, and that's part of the reason why it's so devastating to watch what we've seen happen over the last 4 months. Is because the we're watching the genocide be live streamed, and people are able to watch what's happening, and all of this footage will all be archived and available for people should those war crimes trials advance. So this is, again, so that's Soraya al-Quds using it. That's a joint operation, which is interesting to note that that's happening. And then if we could just pause it with this one spot here, Tamara, if you just want to juxtapose the absolute cowardice of the Israeli army executing people who are bound and blindfolded, or raiding a hospital in Jenin dressed like they're holding babies, holding wheelchairs, dressed like doctors, so that they can go into a hospital room and execute an already paralyzed fighter who's 18 years old, and then tells the media that he's a Hamas commander, and that somehow justifies it. And you juxtapose that with what you're looking at right there, a Yasin 105 staring down the barrel of a 75-ton tank, and not flinching. In fact, executing his operation effectively. The juxtaposition just couldn't be starker from the absolute cowardice that we're seeing from the Israelis targeting civilians, and the Palestinian fighters, now 4 months on, are still able to mount these kind of operations.
Jon, if I could just ask you a question. Can you tell, maybe you're going to address this, but can you tell, did the videos give us enough information to tell us the intensity of the resistance? Can you say that it's at the same level as it was a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, Abu Ubaidah tells us once a week a summary of the field reports that come out all day long, every day, of these reports, and they targeted 70 Israeli vehicles, armored vehicles, last week. They carried out 57 operations. So the tempo of those operations, even though Israel is not. They're trying to be careful. It appears that Israel believes that a ceasefire is coming in, and they're trying to keep their soldiers out of as much as possible out of the line of fire while carrying out this genocide from the air predominantly. But no, we don't see any kind of degrading of the resistance capabilities. We're seeing these Yassins that are homemade in the Gaza Strip using Israeli bombs that don't explode and taking the explosive material out of the Israeli bombs and sending them back at their tanks in weapons that are designed, that are built in the Gaza Strip by their own hands. And we're seeing 4 months on that there doesn't appear to be any limit to that. So the preparation, the homegrown defiance of the civilian population as well. What the civilians are going through, living in their flooded tents right now, starving, crisis levels. The World Food Program doesn't even know what language to use because they told us that it was a dire emergency 10 days ago. That more than 80% of the world's catastrophic famine is amongst the civilians in Gaza. But there's no impact that we're seeing on the Palestinian resistance. And the Israelis and American intelligence sources are confirming that when they say things like 80% of the 350 miles of tunnels are still intact. And that's
and by
a low number.
80%, and yeah, right.
The Israelis think there's actually 450 miles of tunnels. So if you have 80% of 350, that's less when you add the 100 more miles that Israel has said exists in these tunnels. And Israel, for the record, doesn't even have any idea what's going on in the tunnels because they're not going down in the tunnels and mapping the tunnels. They're destroying nodes of the tunnels. They're destroying shafts of the tunnels. But we know from Israeli prisoners that the tunnels are a spider web. They're not straight lines. You can't just dig one hole in a cemetery, which we've seen 16 different places, 16 different cemeteries in Gaza dug up by the Israelis. And the one cemetery left untouched is the one with World War II Jewish fighters in the cemetery. And they stuck a flag on that cemetery to protect it. And so Israel's carrying out these operations against the tunnels. They're saying they're flooding the tunnels. Now that's become a media story because the IDF showed us one of the pumps that they're putting down in the tunnels. This is not impacting the depth and complexity of the tunnel network. One of the prisoners who was released described walking for 5 hours in the tunnel, underground for 5 hours. She talked about 5 tiers of the tunnels. The Israeli soldiers aren't doing anything like going down 5 tiers in these tunnels. That's not happening. What we're seeing is Israeli reports going down 20 meters, which in Gaza terms is basically a large basement because we know the tunnels are in many cases more than 80 meters deep. The prisoner that was released described the bombing. And she said, the only way you could tell that there was bombing happening, a genocide up on the ground level where they're killing tens of thousands of people. The only way she could tell underneath is that the tunnels swayed, which gives you a clue about the engineering of the tunnels, that they're able to do that. And so we're seeing like fake numbers produced by the Israelis. They're clearly hiding their casualties and they're not degrading the resistance. Of course, resistance fighters have died. Many have died in courageous battles, but nothing like the number that the Israelis are saying. But even if we took Israel's number, they're saying 8,000. Of a fighting force of the 𝐤𝐿 brigades. That's 40,000 fighters, not including their police and security services that could become part of the resistance, not including the half a dozen other resistance groups that are staffed and fighting in this fight as well. So the military objectives for carrying out a genocide have to be extremely high to justify these massacres of civilians. And there's nothing militarily like that at all going
Jon,
on. We have not seen 8,000 dead fighters, and Israel produces snuff films every day, and those numbers don't match at all what we've seen of fighters killed. But we're not going to know. These are things that we can't know because we're not accessing the resistance as this fight is going on. And the 𝐤𝐿 brigades are hiding their casualties too. They're not telling us their casualties right now, but they will. because they're proud of their fighters and they'll honor them when this war is over.
John, you make an important point there, which is that the Israelis have never hesitated to show their snuff films. So if they had even a fraction of that number of dead Palestinian fighters, they would show them, and they haven't. And we hope that the resistance fighters are not being killed. They are fighting a right. I say this. This is my belief that Palestinians, like anyone else, have a right to resist. So, but going back to that 80% figure of tunnels still being intact, that came from a report in the Wall Street Journal citing unnamed US and Israeli officials saying that they believe that 80% of the tunnels are intact. And my view is that if they say 80%, it's probably 98%. But anyway, 80% still is an acknowledgement of failure on their part. Now, the other thing it says in that article in the Washington Post, again, in the Wall Street Journal, again, citing these unnamed Israeli and US officials, is that the attempts to flood the tunnels, which we have talked about over the past few months on the live stream, the attempts to flood the tunnels have failed. And they say that they have failed because the tunnels can be shut off. There are doors that can block them off so that the water can't travel. So as you had predicted, and as we talked about, the engineers who built these tunnels have thought about that. So that's just something I wanted to point out too, because again, they seem to, so if they're not going down the tunnels, if the flooding doesn't work, we did see them attempt to use poison gas, and they ended up gassing one of their own prisoners of war who was held in a tunnel, at least according to his mother. Then it's game over. And they can't bomb the tunnels from the air because the bombs can't penetrate that far underground. So they're done, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Or is
Ali, I
that too
said that on
glib?
the 9th of October on our first ever Electronic Intifada live stream. This is an impossible task that the Israeli army is not up for. First of all, the Special Forces unit, the Yahalom unit, that's their anti-tunnel unit, they're combat engineers. They're engineers. They're not combat Special Forces troops that are going into these tunnels and fighting in this way. And so even the pretense that they're pretending like they're doing that, it's not happening. And you can read through, I don't recommend it, but you can read through the Israeli Defense Forces own statements on these issues. And the key thing that was in that Wall Street Journal article is that it was almost like the Americans were saying, like, what's going on here? Why is this not happening? Why is there not propaganda victories out of this situation? And the Americans said that it's because the Israelis are targeting nodes of the tunnel. They're targeting nodes of a spider web. So imagine in your brain a spider web, and targeting one node of that spider web is not doing anything. You break, even if you dig one, like they tried to break up the continuity between the north and the south by digging a tunnel and breaking up the tunnel in the middle camps area. That doesn't work if you have a spider web. So the resistance is, I mean, we don't know, but I can assure you that there is not a way to pour with a couple of pumps into to the tunnel system and flood it. These tunnels are built below the water table. So the engineers in the Gaza Strip who built this incredible network that the Israelis are even themselves are shocked by how good it is. It's so much better than they believed it was. And even their humanitarian arm of the IDF, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 said it was an incredible achievement, what has been dug. And the idea that the Israelis give, like saying, well, this money could have been used for something else. To use money to dig and build an underground network that makes your resistance genocide proof is an incredible development for the Palestinians. What we're watching is the second Nakba, but we're watching it be defended in a way that the first Nakba wasn't able to be defended because of the erasure of the Palestinian movements during the Arab uprising, a decade before that. So the ability for Palestinians to defend themselves has changed the equation forever. And the idea that you can dismantle UNRWA and get rid of the Palestinian question for the Israelis is just ludicrous. And what we're watching is a fighting force that's killed more Israeli soldiers since October the 7th than died in the entire occupation of Lebanon from 1985 to 2000. In combat, so double the number. So just when you think about it in those terms, Israel faced its most comprehensive defeat on October 7th, and that's what they're negotiating right now, trying to get their prisoners out. Let's do a couple more here. Let's do number 8 tomorrow. So this is targeting a bulldozer. This is the Qassam brigades fighting in Khan Yunis, going upstairs to a house that doesn't have a second floor on it.
And that's the military wing of Hamas, right?
That's the military wing of Hamas. And you can see that they've chosen this bulldozer as it loops back around. This bulldozer is reversing. So the fighters that have a position in this building have watched the bulldozer pass without hitting it, and then are waiting for it to reverse. And maybe we can pause it on this go through here tomorrow, because you can see, first of all, the position of it, the courage of that, but look at the efficacy. That is too close for any, first of all, the slat armor that you see on the bulldozer, that's the cockpit of the bulldozer right there. So there's 2 soldiers in there. And that slat armor, you can see, is angled towards the ground. And this is also something that we said on the 9th of October, is that Palestinians are going to use the built-up area to attack Israeli vehicles from above, which is much more, it's a much more vulnerable place to hit these armored vehicles that are all built to defend against bombs that are planted in the ground or shot from ground level. To change the angle of the attack is something that Palestinians are able to do, both because of their tunnel network, which allows them to move around the city without exposing themselves, but also then to climb the building of this house and hit from above. And then there's so many clues. If we could just run it tomorrow, there's so many clues in each of these videos about what's going on. First of all, just the wanton destruction, that destroying a building and only blowing its front walls out, that's not serving any military purpose. If you're dropping the buildings and then bulldozing the land, you could see some sort of military objective, that you're removing the oversight. But to just destroy a house like this, some family's home that's now living in under the tarps that wrap the aid trucks, just criminal what we're seeing. But Palestinians are using that landscape that Israel created. It's just basically military vandalism. If you just leave the building standing like this, and we know the first day that there's a ceasefire, Palestinians are going to go back and they're going to live in that house. They're going to clean up what you see on the stairs there. That's probably their child's bedroom. They're going to clean it up. They're going to hang curtains, and they're going to live in a bombed out house until the donor countries get it together with to get the aid in. And Palestinians are going to do that. The barber shop is going to resume cutting hair. Children are going to resume going to school in ad hoc schools because Palestinians resist on all levels of their society. The resistance is happening, but just to see that a few times, to see what that destruction is, purposeless destruction in a military context. The Palestinians are still able to use the tunnel that was in that house or within that neighborhood at some point, and Palestinians are able to fire down from over top of them. And also just to point out one more time that the bulldozer is reversing, that this fighter is moving into position to hit the bulldozer as it's reversing so that he can hit the front of the bulldozer, which we can see in that video that he clearly does. Let's go to number 9, Tamara. This is 𝐓𝐡𝐞 versus, this is 2 angles here. So they're giving us cameramen on 2 spots to hit a brand new Israeli Merkava tank that's in. So again, we're seeing coordination between the fighters. This isn't ragtag forces because they've been dismantled in the way that Israel says. These videos look exactly the same as the videos from 3 months ago. The fighters have the same communication, the same skill. They're hitting with these shots, and again, you're seeing from above. So they're using the terrain that Israel has created to attack the Israelis. And here's a drone. I haven't done the drones yet, but I'm still trying to figure out exactly what's going on with these drones. But it appears that they're landing these Israeli drones. Look at that drone. It's in perfect condition. So, and this is part of a number of these drones that we've seen that I'll bring to you on a future show once we figure out what's going on. But they're not being shot out of the air.
Maybe
It
they're
appears these drones are
hacked
being,
into?
they're being, it appears
I
they're
mean,
being
some
GPS
of them a
spoofed.
bit. Some of them look like they're being shot out of
Some
the
of them are shot down.
yeah.
So 𝐓𝐡𝐞's last field report, they said that they've seized 8 of these drones and shot down 2 of them. So they're using language seized, hijacked. So it's not entirely clear what's happening, but it appears that they're able to get at these miniature drones. And we've seen Soraya Al-Quds you take the camera out and get the data, and then use the data from the Israeli drones to target Israeli positions, which is something that we haven't seen drone footage from Gaza in quite some time, because Israel just massacres any journalist that's using this tool. So something for a future show, and maybe when we, this war, this genocide is so comprehensive that it requires us to be technology experts, infrastructure experts, aid experts. The technology part is, I'm not totally clear, but we know that the Iranians have GPS spoofed American drones. So it wouldn't be surprising if the Palestinians had that capability. And we know that the Palestinians know how to target, because on October 7th, the blinding operation to take out Israel's network connectivity was a critical part of that operation. And so, again, we don't have access to the fighters. We're trying to piece this stuff together with our experience and knowledge and bring it to you guys live in this 1 week in which it happens. After the war, I'm sure we'll be able to talk to the fighters about exactly what they're doing, because this resistance has been very skillful on all levels that we're seeing. Let's do so also just one more thing about the previous videos. When you're firing between buildings in an urban area, the Israeli armored vehicles countermeasures, the Trophy active protection system, the radar can't pick up the incoming round. So those rounds are hitting on tank crews that are 6. They're hitting on the turrets of those tanks where the commander and the driver are in. But we're not seeing that matching Israeli casualty figures that we'll talk later about Lebanon as well, the Israel and the West Bank. Israelis are hiding their casualties clearly, because they don't match what we're seeing in these videos.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment. These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on donate now. Thank you.